Tel Aviv is something like the creative centre of Israel, and it's therefore hardly surprising that it's here that Kalbata gets up to mischief, musically speaking that is. His musical fine-tuning, however, is something he picked up during the many years he spent in London while he was studying photography. Kalbata's first experience of partying in London was a deeply spiritual experience for him, and one that certainly made its mark on him. One still hears that today in his music, which plays between the fringes of reggae, dub and electro. As is so often the case, bass plays a very distinguished role for Kalbata. Another thing with which he claims to have a very special connection is the sea.
I was born in Tel Aviv, which is just by the sea. And it's actually like one of the best elements about that city. So I grew up really close from the sea. So all my early childhood experiences are somehow related to that. For me, the sea is like it's the final frontier. You know, it's the end of all humanity. So it's like that's where it ends. You know, nobody can get you when you're out there. So I don't know. This whole connection to the water has like a really liberating effect on me, like in many ways.
A ninja with ninja, a ninja with ninja, a ninja with ninja. You're a ninja.
Around 2001, I moved to London. I went to do a photography degree there. But I think the choice of London was quite influenced by I don't know, my musical attraction to London, which seemed like everything that I was into, everything led into that city. And when I moved like into my first or second house there, I met this group of people who are this collective and a sound system called Dead Silence. And it consists of DJs and producers who are all pushing this sort of like electro Miami bass thing, but but the UK version of it, which was like much harsher, almost like techno-y, quite like aggressive electro. And I felt that was like very similar to what I was into, but it was like this whole new world of free parties and raves, of like from people who were actually there, like in the early 90s, going out to all these parties. And I started like hanging out with them, and was really influenced like by a lot of them. It was people like the Dexorcists, Warlock, Black Mass Plastics, Bass Junkie, Radioactive Man, and just a group of really like talented people. And those were like really strong like experiences that I went through, in a way that it just astounded me, like how seriously these people take like the art of rave, you know. And I think my music is very much like trying to recreate those two experiences, like the experience of the sound system, or like my experience in the sound systems and my experiences in those raves, and which is like very electronic and harsh on the one hand, but like quite, I don't know, meditative and deep on the other. So it's the best way to describe my musical world. My musical influences are quite varied, and mainly I'm influenced by reggae, and mostly like around early dancehall, rub-a-dub, and until what they call the digital era, which is sort of like the time when producers moved from recording live bands to not having money to record live bands and recreating the same rhythms for like the new DJs that were coming, and then actually producing rhythms on like electronical means, which is like quite an interesting time in reggae music, because it was like a time of uncertainty, and it was like a nice fertile ground for like a lot of new things that were really interesting.
And if I your name Panda, and if I your name Commando, and if I your name one absolute man, Tigana, Tigiding, 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 ding, 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 Tigiding, ding, ding, ding.
I started producing electronic music when I was really into electro. When I say electro, I mean more like the American sort of Miami bass electro, stuff like Dynamics 2, Egyptian Lover, Arabian Prince, and which is also quite like a bass-driven music, and that's like that was my first sort of thing that I was trying to do. So I'm going into all these like reggae influences and other things actually from that sort of like groove. That was like the first groove that grabbed me. You know, like there was this track by Dynamics 2 called "Just Give the DJ a Break," which is like one of the most famous sort of Miami bass tracks. I don't know, when I first heard the track, I was like, yeah, you know, this is what I want to do. This is like, yeah, I want to make stuff like that. You know, this, yeah. So I started like doing that, but I didn't have like a lot of references. I don't know, like in Israel, especially back then, like before internet and things like that, you didn't really know like what was related to what and like about scenes or like currents in electronic music. It was just like by chance, you know. You just stumble upon some music, you like it, and you sort of move on with that. And I think like you had to sort of invent your own little world, because there was no scene or nowhere to go and listen to that music. So you had to sort of invent your own little world and come up with actually like quite new things that aren't related to any sort of scene. And I think, I don't know, in a way it's something that's been quite consistent in my work, because I draw like my influences from like my personal experiences and stuff that really hit me hard, but I was never really a part of any scene specifically.
Back in the day, street rap invented in the UK. By the people that came over the Saxon MC. Saxon come from Louisville, but the king ain't come from Stoke. It's the king, let's go you with and I'm up to Louisville. Back in the early 1980s, living still we yesterdays. Blue stars and trophies and sound systems were the way we used to live.
I think my sound isn't that eclectic. Like it is in the way, like in the amount of influences that I use, but it's quite unanimous, like in what it's projecting, I think. People sometimes ask me like how come my music is so dark, and like or why actually. For a long time it was really hard for me to answer that, because it just came naturally. But I think, I don't know, looking back to the experiences that I've been through musically, it's always been like about, you know, grabbing your attention. And I think like making something like that's quite dark and fierce, you immediately sort of I don't know, maybe like taken away like a little bit, but then you really pay attention to what's happening, and this sort of dynamic that I was used to, like, I don't know, with everything every type of music that I discovered always like kind of startled me in the beginning, and I just wanted to get close to it. I don't know, for me it's like an interesting way to go into the places where I take myself or would like to take the listener to, and yeah, they're quite serious.